Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Global Great Awakenings on globalfreedomtv.com. I'm Scott Bennett, your host. We're joined by the great Mike Harris. We're going to be jumping into some of the issues revolving around Ukraine and the origins and the starting of that and what we see transpiring now. We're also going to look at a bit of Iran in the United States and what seems to be unfolding there. Doug McGregor has been making some comments on that, I think is worthwhile. And then also some other periphery things containing our own uh, Renaissance, Civil War, Revolution that is coming upon us. There's also some interesting stories about tractors and farmers in Europe. And Mike, let me just start off with that video and then let you jump right in to comment on it. And this was a video of tractors in France and what they are currently doing. So, Mike, help us out. What's going on over there?
Well, the farmers are letting the establishment know, the ruling class, that they don't approve of what they're doing. So people don't understand the power of farm equipment. And I saw one video where a tractor had engaged one of these armored police vehicles. It looks like an MRAP type, and the tractor just went out and put its front. The tractors have weights on the front because when they pull a plow, they're liable to rise up. So they always just push the weights against the front of this vehicle, and the vehicle had been moving. The police vehicle had been moving forward. The tractor engaged it and backed it all the way up. There was nothing the personnel inside the armored vehicle could do to stop the tractor because it's so outpowered what they're trying to do. People do not understand the power of farm equipment and tractors in particular, and they have got traction and they can move things. And so what they're showing the government is that you may think you're going to tell us what to do, but we are not powerless. And there's things they can do. I mean, you can take a plow and with a big tractor. I mean, you've seen these big rigs that have got two tires on each corner, and they're big. I mean, these are 200, 250 horsepower tractors, which for a tractor is a lot of power. And you can drop a plow on the back of that thing, and you can take that plow and you can take it across an interstate highway, and the interstate highway will have a furrow in it. And you can do that 4 or 5 times, and no traffic's going anywhere. They're not going to be able to cross it. It can be pretty quickly and easily repaired, but they can shut down commerce. They can shut this stuff down pretty quickly, and people don't realize that they're screwing with the wrong group here. This is who feeds us. This is who feeds the people, and without food, we all die. The cabal, if you will, has announced their plans. They want to reduce the population by 90%. And one of the most cost-effective means of genociding people is to starve them to death. So, of course, naturally, they're attacking the farmers, and they're telling us that carbon is a poison when every life form on the planet Earth
Yeah,
that we're
what?
aware of is a carbon-based life form.
Yeah,
And so, without carbon, we go away.
yeah.
So, this bullshit that Lurch, John Kerry tells us, and Al Gore, that climate change and carbon are all the same. It's total BS. I mean, remember what was it, 15, 20 years ago, when they outlawed Freon 12, which was the most effective coolant of putting a hole in the ozone layer? Bullshit. Never did. So it switches to carbon Freon 134, and now that patent's expiring, so they're going to have to come up with something new. But they just follow the money. These people have a game, and they want us to fund our own genocide. And so it's amazing the antics that they try to pull to me. That they think we don't see what you're doing. We see
You
it.
know, Mike, I have to come back to some of the stupidest people I've ever witnessed have been cops, police officers at situations, moments, and confrontations like this. Cops. I've seen them in Canada stop trying to stop the trucker convoy, arresting Canadians brutally. I mean, the savagery and the stupidity of the Canadian cops is mind-numbing during the trucker convoy. And now we see it again here. Here are cops in France. Look at this guy putting his hand as if you're going to stop a truck. You're going to stop a tractor. You know, and I don't know. Again, I always come back to no one wants violence and chaos, but we're not going to suffer being forcibly injected or being starved or having our property or freedom taken away from us. People are going to die fighting before they allow that to happen. And these police just don't seem to get it. They don't seem to be on the right side. If they were on the right side, they would be refusing unlawful orders. They would be refusing to confiscate tractors. They would be refusing to try and force any of this climate change, global warming, religious worship of the environment ideology. They would not be pushing that, and yet they are. And I'm wondering, just to close out this segment on the France and the farmers and what's happening there, how do you see this ending? What is going to be unfolding during this in the next few days, weeks,
Well,
months?
I see the collapse of the Macron government and happening pretty soon. They really don't have a leg to stand on. They're not very popular. They've had the yellow vest railing against them for a long time. Nobody likes this government. This is another WEF lackey who's been put into place, but he's operating under the color of law. And once these cops in France realize that their food prices and availability is going up and availability is going away, they're going to understand what Macron is, what he's doing. And but the cops are also trapped because they have a family, they need a paycheck, they've got a retirement. Hang on one second. I've got somebody making a lot of noise in the background.
Yeah, no
here,
problem.
okay?
Well, we see some other stories that's interesting. Flames and angry protests rage outside EU Parliament. And this is what we're talking about. Let me just read this while we are discussing it. Thousands of farmers descended on Brussels, where they burned manure and pelted the legislature with eggs. A crowd of furious farmers picketed the EU Parliament building in Brussels on Thursday to protest environmental regulations and the threat to their livelihoods posed by cheap Ukrainian imports. The protesters hurled stones, eggs, and abuse at the bureaucrats behind police lines. Convoys of tractors began streaming into Brussels on Wednesday night, and by Thursday morning, the streets of Belgian capital were blockaded by about 1,300 vehicles, according to a police estimate. The farmers assembled in front of the European Parliament building on Luxembourg Square, where they burned pallets and piles of manure. The crowd lobbed eggs, stones, fireworks, and flaming projectiles at the legislature, while similar scenes took place outside the nearby headquarters of the European Council. So this is the European Parliament and the European Council, all these bureaucratic agencies that are being confronted. Riot police used water cannons to extinguish the fires and push back stone-throwing protesters. As of Thursday, no arrests or injuries had been reported. Funny, you don't see the farmers, which are probably all white, breaking down buildings and looting and robbing. You don't see them engaging in the mobbing of stores like some of these Africans. Yeah, they've been throwing rocks and firecrackers at politicians, but for good purpose, good reason. Here's another one. The protest was a culmination of months of demonstrations in different countries. Farmers in Germany have blocked city streets since December, demanding that Chancellor Olaf Scholz abandon his plans to scrap a diesel subsidy, while those in France have also protested rising energy costs. In Eastern Europe, farmers have been demonstrating against an EU policy allowing tariff-free imports of cheap Ukrainian grain, which significantly undercuts local produce. Across the bloc, decisions made in Brussels are a common source of grievance. Farmers have condemned the EU's planned Mercosur trade deal, which would allow the tariff-free importation of produce from Latin America, thereby forcing EU farmers to sell at a lower price. The farmers have also demanded that the EU roll back regulations, including a requirement that they leave 4% of their land fallow and reduce livestock numbers to lower nitrogen emissions. A short walk from the protest, the European Council met on Thursday morning, but agricultural issues were not on the agenda. The Council agreed on a $50 billion package of economic aid to Ukraine. Instead, Belgium Prime Minister Alexander De Croo told reporters that the farmers' concerns would be discussed, stating that EU leaders need to make sure that the farmers can get the right price for the high-quality products. With the European Parliament elections coming up in June, the European Commission announced on Wednesday that it would grant the farmers some limited concessions, including a one-year exemption from the fallow land rule and a promise to cap imports on Ukrainian poultry and eggs. So, Mike, the European Parliament, the European Union, the European Commission, all of these big bureaucratic agencies of Europe that have taken shape in the last 30 years, really, it never used to be like that. Europe was a patchwork of individual countries and cultures and languages and his traditions and personalities. Now, the Nazi Germans in the 70s and 80s all created this grandiose, centralized European behemoth, and it's leading to what we see now. And I would agree, and I'll give it to you to close us out on this. I could see all of this descending into absolute disarray, disunion, and all of the individual states of Europe saying, we're done. We're not abiding by any European Council, Parliament, or Union orders or mandates or recommendations. We're going to do what's in our best interest as farmers and as, Frenchmen, Germans, whatever they are. Mike, I'll hand it to you.
Well, Scott, what you're seeing from the farmers is rejection of globalism. I mean, they're rejecting it. They don't want grain and cheap agricultural products from Ukraine. They don't want fruits and vegetables from Central and South America. They're rejecting globalism for localism, for nationalism. And I encourage that trend. I encourage that trend in the U.S. And in fact, I've begun working on a white paper that working name is called Fortress America, to where the United States is going to have to become fully self-sufficient and not depend on foreign trade, because the dollar is collapsing. No one will take the dollar anymore. And if we want things, we're going to have to build them and make them here ourselves. So we need to redevelop our economy in a new way and get moving away from the way it had been structured under Clinton, with the interdependency that we have on other countries, for the goods and services that when we export our manufacturing base overseas. But you're seeing the Europeans rejecting globalism. And you look at what portion of agricultural products are actually make up the GDP of France, of Germany, of Belgium, the Netherlands. And they're extremely productive, and they add a lot of value to those economies. You take that quotient out of there, these farmers go broke, their economies go broke. And I want to draw everyone's attention to what Joseph Stalin did to Ukraine during the Holodomor, when he starved 15 million Ukrainians to death. And the people of Ukraine to this day have not forgotten it. When I was in Ukraine, my translator, a lovely young woman named Ina, and just adored the girl. She's smart, she's pretty, she's everything you ever want a Ukrainian girl to be. But she was my translator, and she invited me to dinner on my third or fourth trip over there to meet her family and to have dinner. They made dinner for me. So I met her mom, I met her dad, and I met her grandmother. And Ina was embarrassed by her grandmother because at the end of dinner, Grandma swept up all the crumbs on the table and ate them. And Ina explained to me that my grandmother survived the Holodomor. She will not waste a single crumb.
Mhm.
And you had the people in Ukraine resorting to cannibalism
Mhm.
as a result of what Stalin did to them by starving them out in order to give the illusion that communist central planning was working when it was an utter failure. They central planned the entire agricultural economy of the Soviet Union. It failed. They didn't know what to plant. They didn't know when. That's like asking the DMV for advice how to plant, your crops.
Yeah, yeah,
And so it failed. So they went down to Ukraine and they stripped everything bare. And then they forbid the people of Ukraine from gleaning the fields. After you've harvested your grain, you go out in the fields, and if you want to take the time and hand pick, you can fill up bushel baskets full of grain that didn't make it into the big grain hoppers, and that became a death penalty item. And so they intentionally starved the people of Ukraine. And that is what we're being positioned for with this globalism, particularly on the food issues, because it is the cheapest, most cost-effective, most efficient way of genociding a population. And that's what Europe is getting ready for, and that's what they're trying to do to us in the USA. You look at how many food processing plants, how many chicken farms have caught on fire, how many chickens have been designated to have avian flu, and you've got to destroy 60 million chickens, overnight. There's no justification for this. You don't waste food like this unless you're trying to starve a population, and this is going on in the United States and in Europe. We can
well,
see it with our eyes. Where we see.
on that particular subject, Mike, it becomes particularly offensive and I mean outrageous that a clear national security risk to the United States or a attack upon the United States, an asymmetric attack upon the United States, is being conducted, and you and I and many many other people, Alex Jones is one of them too, and Mike Adams and the rest. There's been voluminous comments and papers and revelations that we are under attack, our food's under attack, our various parts of our infrastructure are under attack. Something's happened that can't be explained. But yet, not one single politician or a person in uniform in Northern Command in the military that's supposed to be guarding the continental United States and the people of the United States and the Constitution, which allows the people and the land to survive, essentially. No one has been publicly addressing the obvious suspicious circumstances around all of these mysterious destructions of chicken farms. Tucker Carlson was talking about it on Fox News indirectly a lot of the time. I mean, but I think he was pretty direct too. Something's happening. Who's doing this? But no police report, no sheriff investigation, no Northern Command investigation, nothing of a public disclosure. No one in the Congress is standing up saying, "Ladies and gentlemen of the United States, we're under attack. Our food, our pork, our chicken, every the trains are being derailed. I'm declaring, some kind of a state emergency or national emergency or something to get to the bottom and stop this." How come nothing like that has happened?
Well, because a lot of our most of these responsibilities fall down to these agencies. If it's an agricultural issue, it's the Department of Agriculture. If the FDA, Food and Drug, USDA for meat and food products. These agencies, and you have to realize that 86% of our government bureaucracy at the SES level, the Senior Executive Service level, is Khazarian Jew. That's the same ratio that Putin said the Soviet Union was during the time of the Bolshevik Revolution. You have to realize that our constitutional republic has fallen. We are down. We know our votes don't count. They steal elections. We saw this with Trump. We're going to see it again in 2024. They're going to attempt it again, in spite of the overwhelming support this man has. We're going to see it again. But the U.S. as it is today does not exist as a constitutional republic. Your congressmen, your senators do not represent you. They represent the donor class, the oligarch class, which is Jewish in nature, and they are the enemies of the people. They're the ones who are bringing this woke agenda. Look at the Pritzker family, the governor of Illinois, Pritzker. His sister, who was born a man, thinks it's a woman walking around parading like it is. They're pushing this mental illness agenda upon everyone. And how do we avoid this? How do we get out from under their control? It's not obvious. It's not easy how to do this. I have some ideas that we'll discuss when we bring up. I watched the movie Fight Club again the other night,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I'll bring up some ideas about that. But really, the first thing you have to do to solve a problem is to correctly identify the problem. And the United States has been infiltrated by people who wish to see us destroyed so that they can take over their entire agenda of global domination. So they say it openly. Hang on a second, please.
Well, that's interesting. On
Sorry about that, but I've got dogs in the house here,
Yeah,
and
no problem.
my
Well,
my what were puppies are now becoming adolescents,
yeah.
and they're learning their jobs and their roles, and they're quite vigorous about it. So
Yeah, well, they've
I
got deep.
apologize to everyone, but they're Belgian shepherds. I'm sure everyone's familiar with the Malinois type variety,
Oh yeah.
but they're Belgian shepherds, and they're very keen and
Yeah.
very frosty. They want a job. They want to go to work. So
Everyone honestly, those are great dogs to have. Very, very intelligent, very defense oriented, very big, very deep growl. Everyone should have dogs like that in the times that we're approaching, if at all possible.
mhm.
Shepherds, Dobermans, Mastiffs, Rottweilers, but big dogs. I can't stand little dogs and people silly and stupid to put them on their lap while they're driving or put them in their
Oh
handbag.
God, yeah, that's
That's just an abomination.
or yeah. Anyway, we digress here, but let me go back to this Fight Club comment. This is a
Yeah,
rather
yeah, I'd like to
brief
hear
one
that.
here. This is rather brief, but you have to remember that this was Brad Pitt and what's his name, Norton. What's his first name?
Yep, yep,
Edward Norton, I
Norton.
think.
Yep.
And the movie came out in 1999, before 9/11.
Yeah.
And in the first 5 minutes, they give us a hint of what's to come via 9/11, and that is they've got explosive loaded vans in the basements of buildings to bring them down. But I digress of the story. But the point of this thing is this Fight Club. It evolved as a movement, and there's one particular scene in there where the police chief is wanting, he's making a speech. He's in public, and he's at this big public event, and there's 1,000 people there, and they're at the tables, and he's at the podium, and he's getting ready to give his speech about how he's going to end Fight Club and how he's going to put this out. This is won't tolerate this lawlessness. But what he doesn't realize is that the nobodies in Fight Club, the people who have waiter jobs, busboy, dishwasher jobs, the people who have no future in this country, who have no future.
Hmm.
That's who Fight Club is.
Hmm.
And so what they do is he has to take a break and go to the restroom. Well, they follow him in the restroom, and then they give him a come to Jesus talking to after they beat the snot out of him and say, "Look, we can get to you. We can get to you anytime." And the reason I bring this up is guys like you and I, nobody's out there. We can get to these politicians. We can get to them. We just have to have the will to do it and the numbers to do it. We outnumber them hundreds of thousands to one.
Hmm.
So we can get to them and give them our message, whether they want to hear it or not.
Hmm.
Now, I'm not advocating anything. That was just an example out of the movie, but it just tells you the vulnerability that these politicians have. They might have a security detail of 3 or 4 guys. So what? If you got 15 or 20 guys, you can overpower the security detail quite easily. And it's just how things have to be
You know,
sometimes. And we're getting to the point where we need to yell at them in such a way that they begin to listen to us and do the right thing for the American people. Because right now, nobody's listening to the American people. I mean, we will not be silenced.
You raise a very fascinating and important issue. The Fight Club dimension represents the character, the people, the blue collar people, the real earthy people, if you will, not the carried away in their own selfish narcissistic reflection, beta males or politicians or things, but the real salt of the earth. There's a two roads to this, Mike. There's those American citizens like us, who are the Fight Club component, if you will, who will fight and die to defend our property, our liberty, our families, our freedom, and such like that. But I want to shift and ask you, because you just provoked this thought in me, the other road of the Fight Club, the illegal aliens, the young military men from China, from San Salvador, from Nicaragua that have come up here. Who knows with what, who knows with whom, but they're in the country now. And they let's just put ourselves in their mind. So we're analyzing the psychographics of this individual or group of individuals from the illegal alien infiltrator. You see, he's a 22 to 25-year-old male. He's got nothing back where he left. He's got no family. Perhaps he was a orphan, or who knows. But he's in the United States now, and I don't think he's ever going to leave. He's going to do everything he can, including fight, evade, to stay here. Now, the question becomes, what is that going to morph into if there's no rambunctious economy? Granted, there's nothing happening down in the banana republics, but the economy of the United States, especially in particular, if there is a shutting down of the dollar or things like this start to go south, and all sorts of other things kick off, the Abbott declaration of independence or statehood, or pulling out of the union, the 25 governors backing Abbott, that whole thing. The Fight Club of the illegal alien that's come in here, what is their strategy to survive, to eat, to clothe themselves? Do you see them putting on the beggar's mantle and trying to get jobs wherever they can find them, or are they going to engage in Fight Club tactics, quasi pseudo crime tactics, spotting or aiding and abetting cartels, being distanced? These don't have to necessarily be the Al Pacino Scarface types, but if they're on the payroll of those types, then they're part of this criminal syndicate. That's the only thing that's gonna pay them to live in the United States. How do you see these? Let's just call them bad guys who's come across the border. How do you see them going into a much more aggressive, malicious, offensive, attacking sort of posture, individually and socially, now that they're in this country? What do you see manifesting out of this criminal class that has come across the border?
Well, they have two choices. One of them is to leave and go back home, because what's the United States going to have left for them here? If our economy crashes, and it's going to crash hard. It's already baked in the cake. To quote Matt Bracken, I listened to him the other day, and we're looking at the dissolution, the destruction of the United States of America as we have known it,
Yes.
and we're going to look at an economic collapse that's going to make the Great Depression look like a holiday. And at that time, 40% of the population lived on farms, so they could grow their own food, chickens, etc., and feed themselves. This time, less than 4% of our population lives on farms. So we're going to have many, many people in this country without access to food, or adequate food to feed the population. So you're going to have a fight, even among good, God-fearing Americans, might have to go out there and scramble to find a way to feed themselves and their kids. Desperate people do desperate things. So I expect these illegal aliens who are here are going to do desperate things pretty quickly. We're starting to see this already in this country where they're being kicked out of the shelters. And so, what are they going to do next? Where are they going to go? How are they going to live? The question comes, well, how do they acquire firearms? Do they carjack people? Do they kick in doors? Do they have home invasions going on? Obviously, there's the easy way of shoplifting, but I think that is about to change because right now they're locking up toothpaste. If you go into a Walgreens or something, they don't leave these things out to be stolen anymore. They can't afford it. And so we're really looking at some severely difficult times. Oh, in Phoenix, Arizona, I've got women friends, of course, men friends too, but women friends are afraid to go to gas stations anymore without having a man accompany them. And the reason is because the panhandlers, the drug addicts, the homeless have become so aggressive to women because you're here, you've got a car, you're filling it with gas, you have money, give me some because I'm desperate and I need it. I need to get high, something. And so my women friends are terrified to go to gas stations alone. And these are in nicer neighborhoods. This is not in what was the rough part of town. This is nicer parts of Phoenix, nicer parts of Scottsdale that have degraded so much that, like I said, women are fearful of
What are the
going.
demographics of the panhandler, class that are approaching and terrorizing women? Are they Hispanics? Are they blacks? Are they whites? Are they a mix?
All of the above. Black, white, Hispanic, and invariably homeless or look homeless, and seem to have drug problems, seem to have addiction issues, and so that's it. But they've been approached by whites, been approached by blacks, been approached by Hispanics, and so there is no demographic discrimination against it. But the women they target are typically white women driving newer, nicer cars.
Of course,
Uh,
of course.
the Hispanic women they let off, typically, but it's white women in nicer cars. If you're driving a nice Jeep Cherokee, you're going to get approached. If you're driving a Mercedes or a BMW, forget about it. You're just painting a target on yourself.
Well,
And so
Mike,
I've been
the guy you mentioned, Mac Brack, or I
Bracken, yeah.
Bracken, thank you. I listened to him too, and I remember that commentary. It's baked in the cake for the economic collapse. But I want to. He said something that no one else has said besides you and I that I've heard. And I've always mentioned this again and again and again. I said it to Alex Jones too, and he kind of confirmed it. Saying, yeah, that's already happening here and here. But that is the kidnapping, human trafficking. He said, the Matt Bracken guy said, what we see happening in Mexico is going to happen in the United States. And I thought,
Yeah.
wow, he's the only one who said what we've said. We've said that exact
Well,
same thing.
in Glendale, Arizona, last week, a Hispanic male, 29 years old, followed a little girl to the school bus stop and chased her down, tried to kidnap her. She did all the right things. She screamed. She got with her friends. They screamed and they ran. But this is they're snatching kids off the street. 11-year-old little girl.
Yes.
Now, the life she would lead, she would be sold to some pedophile
Yeah.
or ransomed back to her parents. But
Yes.
this is what has been going on in
Yes.
Mexico. We cannot tolerate these savages
No.
among us.
No.
And so, what we're going to have to do, see, right now, we're hamstrung because if you shoot some guy who's chasing a little girl down the street because he deserves to be shot, if you do that, you've got a world of trouble on your hands of what you're going to do and the legal repercussions for you because you're going to get prosecuted. You're going to, if he's got somebody, you're going to get sued. You're going to get this, you're going to get that, get the other thing. Lawlessness is going to increase enough. So bad news is going to be good news because we're not going to tolerate this much longer. We just simply cannot as a
Yeah.
society and stay coherent as a society.
Well,
So
you're gonna have inevitably people having to kill guys chasing little girls, and then they're just gonna leave. They're not gonna wait around to file a report. And if there is a cop that happens to be there shows up and says, okay, well, you've got to give me your firearm, and I'm going to put you in handcuffs, and we're going to take you downtown and do this official, the guy's going to say no. And if you try, I'm going to kill you. I'm not going to submit to lawlessness. And if you're on the side of lawlessness and harming the citizens, you're an enemy of this country. I don't care how many bureaucratic certificates or licenses or forms or hurdles or claims or codes or whatever you want to use to justify putting me in handcuffs for killing a savage that was about to rape and kill a little girl. That's not going to happen. And I could see that happening because of a combination of the stupidity of cops traditionally. They're very dumb for the most part. They have no imagination. They're unable to get beyond their IDF training. Most of them have a big chip on their shoulder anyway. Most of them are, on some kind of a medication, or there's some traumatized, aside from some of the military guys. But I could see the cops in this country, because of their stupidity and I hope I'm wrong. I hope they would side with the citizens.
Scott,
I
I
hope they
need to
say, yeah, go ahead and do it. I'm not going to look and see and do anything.
I need to interject here because I know a few cops, and for the most part, they're pretty good guys, pretty rational, pretty reasonable, but they're put in very difficult situations very often. And it's a job I would never want, because anytime you're a cop, your entire day is filled with other people's negativity. If you're the
Yes.
victim, you're having a bad day. If you're the perpetrator, you got caught, you're having a bad day. If you're dealing with an accident, somebody's having a bad day. Dealing with a homicide, a crime, whatever, you're having a bad. These guys live in perpetual negativity,
Yes.
and so how they cope with it is a difficult challenge for them. So I don't want to put them down. I want to put down the management and how policing is conducted. Now, inevitably, if you watch the TV news, you watch any of the mainstream news, which I've weaned myself off of Fox. I'm a Newsmax OAN guy now, and more OAN than Newsmax, because OAN's a little more honest.
Yeah.
But you look at
Newsmax
these,
has a little too much Zionism in it.
way too much Zionism. But you look at these interviews. They interview the mayor, the chief police of Chicago, the chief police of Dallas, the chief of police of St. Louis, the chief of police of Atlanta. You know what they are? All black women all the time. And black women all the time can't run police departments. I'm sorry. And
They can't run men. No woman
it's
on the face of the planet can run a man, can manage a man. A man is built differently. A man is meant to charge the field, go into the wilderness, kill giants, kill bears, do it with a smile, do it with a blood curdling ecstasy and the hammer in the hand, and come back and then rest in the arms of his woman and his children and eat and feast and go out and do it again. Women
Scott,
are meant to respond to men. Women are meant to reflect men, not lead men. That has been the devil's perversion of this entire world, is inverting the roles, which naturally, it's like pulling out the you're probably better than I am, but pulling out the electrical wires of a machine, or the battery, right? The positive and the negative,
and
right? Well,
reversing
they've
it.
taken them and they've hooked them up to the different outlets. And what happens? Sparks and burning and smells, and everything's wrong. That's what they've done to America. That's what the devil himself has done. They've
Let me
replugged
finish my
things
point.
and it's chaos.
Let me finish my point. But we're seeing the effects of this diversity, equity, inclusion uh, movement here that's being forced upon us. We have to give women equal rights. We're always told that, well, if we have a feminine viewpoint, things are going to be softer, things are going to be better. Well, we see what soft on crime has done. It's escalated crime through the roof. And you're correct. There are certain things men are suited for, and other things women are suited for, and they're not the same. Anyway, Scott, can we hit the pause button here? I got somebody pestering me.
Yeah.
Let's hit the pause button for a minute. Okay, well, thanks for the short break there, Scott. I had household duties, being a dog owner I had to deal with a young dog, and she's young and she's cute. But hey, they don't care that you're busy doing something else. Anyway, to get back on this DEI issue, we've seen what it's done to police and policing nationwide.
Yeah.
All of these major departments, and you can do your own homework if you're a listener out there. Look around, watch the news, and see who the spokesmen are. And when the chief of police is a black woman, you know it's a blue city, you know it's high crime and getting higher. It's just how it is. Now we've got this drag queen who runs United Airlines and other airlines. The FAA has come out and stated that they're going to require more black women to be, or women of color to be airline pilots. Well, they've got no experience. They've never flown. They just aren't going to do well in the job. And if I ever have a black woman as a pilot, I'm going to get off the plane. I'll sacrifice the ticket. I'll take a Greyhound before I'll fly with a black woman pilot. I'm sorry. I'm just my life is worth more than their political agenda.
Yeah.
I'm not going to take the chance. I don't have confidence that many pilots could have done what that guy Sully did when he landed
Yeah.
that jetliner on the Hudson River and got everyone out alive. I
Yeah.
really don't think that a woman of color is going to be able to handle that emergency in the way that a white male can handle it. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to jeopardize my life, my traveling companions, friends, family, etc., their lives because BlackRock and the Jewish cabal has decided that they want to have diversity, equity, and inclusion. It just isn't going to happen. And I want to point something out to people about Boeing airliners. Okay. If you remember, about 4 or 5 years ago, Boeing left Seattle and they moved their headquarters to Chicago. And at that point in time, Boeing stopped being an engineering oriented company and became a financial oriented company. And they went from having a primarily white male workforce to in Chicago, they're going to have Jewish managers and they're going to have black workers. And so you look at the problems that Boeing is having putting product out the door, getting products that work, that function. They're having a hard time. Diversity is death,
Yes.
and uh, and we as the American people don't have to put up with this crap. And so boycott United Airlines. Don't fly them. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't care. Like I said, I'll take Greyhound before I'll take a United flight with a woman of color as the pilot. I just
Yeah.
won't do it.
Yeah.
My life is more important to me than their political agenda.
Yes.
So I'll let that one rest for a moment. But this is something people need to be aware of. And remember, Boeing was an engineering company. They built wonderful products,
Yes.
but then they moved from Seattle to Chicago, and their engineering they abandoned the engineering staff and they became a financially oriented company, and they're losing their mud. They can't build the products that made them anymore.
Boeing
So
Boeing built the planes, if I'm not mistaken, dating way back to World War II. Boeing was the manufacturer of all of the dinosaurs that we had in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s that have evolved into what we are currently flying, the 747s and 707s.
Boeing, McDonnell aircraft, Douglas aircraft, McDonnell Douglas combined.
Yeah.
You've got all these mergers and acquisitions, and what we've seen, and I've complained about this for a long time, is we see through the process of mergers and acquisition following the private equity model, we see more and more control and more money in fewer and fewer hands, and so there's less competition for everything. We notice this in the news networks, primarily the big ones, the ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox. There's like six of them, but now we're seeing some little upstarts coming in. The OANs and the Newsmaxes are coming in a little bit, but we saw it in communications. Reagan was going to you know re, deregulate the telecom. He's going to anything that got deregulated in the Reagan administration has become a monopoly, and not really a monopoly, but a cabal of very few companies that are in collusion with each other. The airline industry. We used to have 50 plus national carriers. Now we're down to United, Delta, American, Southwest, and a couple upstarts that are out there, but nothing big. I mean, what happened to Piedmont? What happened to Allegheny? What happened to TWA? What happened to
Pan
um,
Air, Pan Am, Pan American,
Pan American?
Transamerica. It
Uh,
used to be TIA, then it became Transamerica. My
well,
uncle,
you're in California. What happened to Pacific PSA Airlines? I mean, all
yeah,
of them got bought up. They all got merged into uh, the bigger monolith here. And the promise is that service would get better and prices would go down. Well, service got worse and prices went up,
yeah,
and you don't
yeah,
have the choice.
yeah,
You have no competition.
yeah.
This is a Jewish model where you eliminate your competition by buying them out, by and absorbing them into your network. And this is it's destroying this country. I mean, the entrepreneurial spirit, they're doing their best to kill it because they want to control everything. And I'll say this because you look at the COVID lockdowns. Maria in Giuseppe's Pizzeria got shut down, but Olive Garden is still open. The little hardware shop on the corner got shut down, but Home Depot is still open. And so if you're a big box store and you've got clout and you've got the big money investors behind you, you can stay open. But if you're a mom and pop, if you're an entrepreneur out there trying to make a living, you're out of luck, and you got to shut down. Our country has turned toxic and has turned hostile against the American people,
Mhm,
and we see it in our government, we see it in our businesses, we see it in everything. And I'll let me say one last thing here on this DEI business,
mhm.
and we can move on to the next thing. But women's sports, why do
Oh,
we have men who are mentally ill pretending they're women competing in women's sports? So
yes,
I was listening
yes.
to the news today, and I heard a woman say this, and she was a competitor. She was a varsity swimmer at some school, and she said, "I would rather see all of the athletic programs merge and not have a men's and women's, but have a co-ed uh, version of it and let the women compete openly against the men, because there's no room in this for these trannies who come in here and compete against women, because that
Yes,
guy
of
who
course.
calls himself Leah, whatever his name is, that
Leah
big
Thomas.
athlete,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and he was like ranked what 512th in the country. Oh, but he's the number one woman swimmer, but he's not a girl. He's a guy with a dick.
yeah.
And so I liked her suggestion to where she said, let's just make it all co-ed and let these trannies compete against real men. And I kind of liked it. And so all you have to do is roll back Title IX. Women's sports will go away because they can't compete. Nobody watches the WNBA anyway. So, but
Well, I mean, you're exactly right. It's a sign of a deeper sickness that's sprung up in the last 5 years. It's a sign of a schizophrenic nation. It's a sign of a pathetic, treasonous education system and a gutless and castrated church spiritual community that is so stupid or cowardly that it refuses to engage the school boards and the political boards and say, not in this town, not in our backyard. The churches of this town are all opposed and standing against that. Whether you're Catholic, Baptist, Protestant, I don't care. But we don't
you
seem
know,
to have that
but
kind of an outrage, and it's an absolute abomination. That is the core of the rot of the United States, is the sexual
Scott, it
schizophrenia.
it was enabled by our homosexual president Barack Obama
Yes.
and his tranny that he's calling the wife, Big Mike Robinson, whatever it is,
Yeah. Michael
and
Avon Robinson, aka
and
Michelle
that
Obama.
that is what enabled all of this movement to get started, because he directed the Department of Justice to file lawsuits. He directed the Department of Justice to have criminal proceedings against anyone who didn't go along with their agenda, and that's how they improved and advanced the rot of our society by
Yeah.
abuse of the power of the office of the presidency and the people that he appointed there.
Let
And
me
so,
shift to Iran and Colonel Douglas
oh
McGregor.
sure, yeah, I want to hear what McGregor says anyway. I like him.
Here we go. Just a portion of it.
Another
Asked me
smart guy.
that, I think it was October, November last year, and I said we're on the path to war with Iran. I think we are. And sadly, I think we will do this. Remember that you have a third of the American electorate that is what I call the bombs away club. If you say we're bombing country X, they'll all cheer. They don't even know what's going on in country X, but they think our greatness as a nation is served by bombing people. It's not, but that's what they think. And remember that Iran is not Iraq. And this is another huge problem. And finally, the Israelis, the thinking ones, and there are many good, solid thinking people at the top of the Israeli Defense Force. Privately, they know we made a mess of the region. It was expected that we would make the region safe for Israel. We didn't. It's been less safe from the moment we entered Iraq. We destabilized it, which is what all the Arab leaders told us we would do. Everyone warned us. Even Erdogan warned us, don't go in and make this matter worse. Don't destabilize the place. Stay out. But we went in. So I would argue that over the last 20 years, we've made it more dangerous for Israel than it's ever been. Now we want to talk, while we're talking about attacking Iran. Iran is a major military power. These are not hapless people with sandals and bed sheets and AK-47s and RPGs and a few command detonated mines. They have real military capability. They have a very sophisticated group of Iranians running the military establishment. They're very good at cyber warfare. They have excellent intelligence. They have brilliant missile technology. I mean, I've sat and listened to the Israelis who've given me very good briefings on this very topic. But the solution to that problem is not to poke it. If you poke it, it will launch. And they will launch and they can attack all the key positions that we have in the region. Remember, we have roughly 57,000 people on the ground in the region. You know, in Qatar, Kuwait, Iraq, Syria. I mean, we just go down the list. All of those positions can be targeted and with great precision attack. Our air defenses are not very good. They simply aren't. They haven't worked well. Our air defenses that we built for the Saudis could not stop Houthi drones, let alone cruise missiles. So who are we kidding ourselves? If we do this, they're going to attack. They'll hit all those installations. Now, somebody said, well, will they attack Israel? I said, I think that depends on what the Israelis do. If the Israelis say, aha, brilliant opportunity, let's launch in support of this American attack, which we strongly support, then I think they'll launch whatever they've got into Israel. And they have enough to basically level Tel Aviv and Haifa. These are long-range missiles, 1,200-mile range with devastating 2,000-pound warheads. They're conventional, and they'll do enormous damage. I call them blockbusters. They'll level city blocks. I don't see anybody benefiting from this. This has been my problem with everything the Israelis have done from day one. I understand what they want. I understand exactly how they feel. There's too much emoting. There's not enough thinking.
Well, the military-industrial complex will make a lot of money off of this. Well, we don't have strong air defenses in these regions, so we really need to spend another $200 billion to shore up our air defenses in the Middle East to protect our American forces, our 57.
And assist and advise. If push comes to shove, they'll join, but they won't try to join. They'll try to stand in the background and provide the Iranians. Obviously, the Russians are not going to watch Iran go under. They will prevent that. They will supply and assist and advise. If push comes to shove, they'll join, but they won't try to join. They'll try to stand in the background and provide the Iranians everything they need. The Chinese will do the same. If the Russians get involved, the Chinese may ultimately get involved because they're desperately dependent upon the oil and gas that comes out of the Persian Gulf. They're not the only ones. If the Straits of Hormuz are closed, if the Gate of Tears is closed and the Suez Canal, it's going to be hell to pay economically at home and all over the world. So eventually everybody will get involved and we'll be standing next to Israel, hated, despised, and under attack from everyone. But there's another front we're missing, Mexico. There's a substantial Hezbollah presence in Mexico. There has been for a long time. You also have ISIS chapters, if you will, operating in Mexico. They have reasonably good relations with the cartels. I imagine that out of the 9 million people that have been allowed to enter our country, there are probably several thousand people connected, primarily to Hezbollah and secondly to these ISIS chapters. I would expect real trouble inside the country. I would even expect the possibility that some of these serious weapons that may be in the hands now of the cartels end up being launched by these Hezbollah and ISIS people against us. We don't know. But I would bet on the worst case. And what have we done about the border? Nothing. And there won't be anything done by the border because nobody in Washington wants to do anything. There are very few people there that give a damn. The people that care are out there in the United States because they're the ones that are the victims of this whole policy of destruction. So this is bigger than the Middle East. This will come and visit us in the United States. And we have stupid people that think we can bomb with impunity and nothing will happen to us. They are wrong.
I hope our audience is paying attention. And I hope anyone watching, please share.
So, Mike, what do you think is going to, let me just preface by saying I like McGregor. I think he's smart on a lot of things. The only flaws that I see in him, and I understand the justification of why he doesn't, but he doesn't talk about 9/11 being a false flag, 9/11 being a Mossad Israeli operation to goad the United States, at least as far as I can remember. I've never heard him talk about that, nor have I heard Flynn talk about this, nor have I heard Scott Ritter talk about 9/11. And that tells me that these people are either afraid to open that Pandora's box or they feel guilty because their whole careers were really made and built upon the 9/11 adventures and wars and everything else. So I came into the Army with the expectation and understanding 9/11 was real. And, I didn't question. That's how effective the PSYOP was until I was thrown in jail and was surrounded by the information and the evidence and the books. And suddenly it's saturated into me. But anyone who's been in the military has a duty to look at the 9/11 as the trigger mechanism for the death of the American Republic we're now going through the final death throes of.
Absolutely.
That started.
Absolutely.
You can't have a pass to that, Mr. McGregor. You can't have a pass to that, Scott Ritter. You can't have a pass to that, Napolitano. No one's man enough to really attack that. So I've got that issue. The other thing about Hezbollah and all these groups on the border, the Iranian groups on the southern border of Mexico and stuff, I've always kind of looked at that with a suspicion. Now, there is a possibility that there are military Hezbollah, Iranian, and other, agents that are down there, Chinese agents that will go paramilitary. But another part of me thinks it just seems inconsistent with their personality, with their culture, with their strategy, because they don't want the United States to turn into a crazy Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde where any bombs or missiles can go off. And I mean, it's a dangerous country. It's if you let the country fall apart, then things really could get dicey. That was our concern about Ukraine in the 1990s. Go in there and get those nuclear weapons out before something goes nuts, right? When the Soviet Union collapsed. But the absence of the southern border inflammation, we're now at this point where Iran is being set up by the Biden administration, according to McGregor, for a military strike engagement. Now, I don't see them attacking Tehran with cruise missiles for that very reason that Iran would counterstrike and wipe Qatar off the map, wipe every U.S. base off the map with its ballistic missile capability. And Russia, I'll end it here. Russia not only would come in, Mike, but if I was betting money on this, and I know the Russians, I was there, I know the Russians to an extent, I would say the Russians are going, we are already in the fight with Iran. We're already advising them. We're already strategizing with them. Our goal is to push the United States out of this region because all you're doing is turning everything on fire. So Russia is not going to wait, in my opinion, to be invited. They are already in there at the hip with Iran saying, okay, you have to push this, you have to do this. This is what we'll give you. They are, in my opinion, setting up Iran to be a fortress, and Russia is not going to wait. They are already actively engaged because the only thing the U.S. has done, is doing, and will continue to do is sow destruction and chaos, disarray, disorganization, so they can profit from the weakness of others that they create and seemingly think that they can profit from the reconstruction, which I don't think is going to take root. No one's going to welcome American firms to rebuild Ukraine or Gaza or anywhere else. It's like saying, you know, the neighbor who burned your house down is a construction guy. You're going to let him reconstruct it? No, you're going to be pissed off emotionally, and you say, I don't care if I have to reconstruct it myself. I'm not going to enrich you. I think that hostility is going to come against the United States. But Mike, I'll put it to you: what you see is flawed in McGregor's testament. What do you see as right, and what do you see as coming? Go ahead.
Well, let me say this about that, Scott. When I was in Syria in 2014 and was attending the international conference to combat terrorism and religious extremism, I met with Russian intelligence officials. I met with Iranian intelligence, okay? And they're already engaged with Syria to defend the Syrian government from the U.S. trying to undermine the Assad regime. Hang on. She's getting a little, somebody walked by. she she stayed away because I yelled at her. But no, they're already engaged. They're already there. I mean, Russia has a significant presence in Syria, at Latakia. I've been there. I've seen the base. It's massive. That is the Russian presence on the Eastern Mediterranean. Russia is not going to let that go. And the Russians understand that the road to Moscow goes first through Damascus, then through Tehran, then to Moscow. They come up that southern route. That is what they understand. That is what they're going to defend. Russia is not going to allow anything to happen to Syria. They're not going to allow anything to happen to Iran. So let's just be very clear about that. These are face-to-face meetings at a dinner table that I've had with people from both countries who are in positions of authority to speak. Okay, yeah. So that's what's going on now. McGregor is correct. And one thing I want to point out, that everybody's all worried about the Iranian nuclear program, and granted, they have a peaceful nuclear program. I've been told from sources I cannot confirm that they're in possession of up to 15 warheads. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, but that is what I've been told by people who are telling me it's true. But what Iran has been focusing on is, you look at the energetic compounds, like TNT is an energetic compound. Semtex and C4 are highly energetic compounds. Iranians have been working on super energetic compounds, things that are more potent, more bang per ounce than a Semtex or a C4 will have, which are pretty powerful explosives. And they've been trying to develop conventional weaponry, conventional explosive compounds that will do as much as a tactical nuclear weapon will do. When McGregor said that it'll take out a city block, it'll take out 10 city blocks. A 2,000-pound warhead of these new materials, they will absolutely take out 10 city blocks. And so they have much more bang for the buck than what the U.S. has in our current arsenal. So I mean, we're playing a losing game here, and our leadership has taken their eye off the function of what the military is. The military is to defend the country, but they've turned it into a profit center, where you look at the exorbitant cost of what our platforms are. Look at this F-35. It's over $1 trillion already into this one platform that doesn't perform well. It doesn't perform well by design. They, how your phone upgrades and have software updates. The F-35 requires software updates across all of its systems all the time. That's a profit center for the manufacturer, that they want to keep being able to bill. And nobody wants to buy this junk. Whereas the Russians have looked at how do we build functional platforms that are going to perform and do the job and cost effectively. So we lost our way thinking after, oh God, when did it happen that we thought that after the fall of the Berlin Wall, that
Yes.
we were the sole remaining superpower and that we could coast and we could spend money. I mean, I've heard this analysis time and again. They're sending $100,000 drone, to take out a U.S. Warship, but they're responding with a $2 million missile. And so, you do the math on this. Who's going to win? I mean, you can send up 20 of these drones for the cost of one missile. And so, all right, so you send up 10,000 of these drones. We don't have enough money. We don't have enough budget. And our warships, our Aegis class destroyers don't have enough arms on them to fight that many. It's a losing battle. The U.S. Navy is a relic. It is a joke. It needs to be reformed from head to toe. And we're going to have other problems coming up. Right now, this coming year, 2024, the United States is spending $886 billion on our military. On the Department of Defense is the budget. That's a lot of money. Okay, the Russians spent $140 billion all last year. We're out of parity with them, and their weapons platforms perform better. That's been demonstrated in Ukraine time and again. I mean, anything they put up or that the Ukrainians put up that we or the Europeans provided is destroyed in minutes. Minutes. And they've got an advantage there in how their platforms work, in how their philosophy of warfighting works.
Yes.
We have lost our way. The arrogance of
Yeah.
being the sole superpower after the fall of the Berlin Wall, they have squandered every advantage while they're trying to get as rich as they can. And then you look at who owns these military industrial, who are their largest shareholders. Well, I know one of them goes back to the Pritzker family and the mayor, not the mayor, the governor of Illinois, his family. You go back to who these people are, the same players time and again. We are not a republic any longer. We are a Jewish oligarchy. We are controlled by them, and they have taken us down the road to perdition. They use our young men and our Christian young men and women the same way that Zelensky uses his Christian population, his Christian army of men. 500,000 dead already. That is how the Jews view us, and they will fight to the last of our till the last of our kids are dead.
Let me
They
transition.
don't care how it is.
Let me transition to Ukraine. What do you see happening there now? There's talks about Zelensky and about to be fired, and there's military guys saying no, they're not going to allow him to be fired. What do you see happening in Ukraine now?
Well, if they don't have a military coup in Ukraine, they need to have one, and they need to sue for peace right now.
Yeah.
And that's what they need to do.
Yeah.
If they do not do that, Russia is going all the way to the Polish border and maybe beyond. The 60 French soldiers that were killed in Ukraine was a big red flag that NATO is already involved in a land war with Russia. And so if these reports are true, it can be verified. And Russian intelligence is very, very good. They'll know exactly who these guys are. They'll have their dossiers. They'll have everything. And they will know that France has engaged in a war of aggression against Russians. Then the equation changes. Russia is prepared and in a good position to take a war to all of Europe. And if they wanted to conquer it, they could. I'm highly confident. Will there be a lot of bloodshed, a lot of loss of life? Yes. I don't believe that's Putin's goal. I think Putin wants to just make sure the Russian Federation does okay, and it gets left alone and not pushed around. But the United States has cost itself so much standing in the world under this Biden regime, this criminal Biden regime, illegitimate Biden regime, that it's pretty much a done deal that this country is going to collapse.
Yes.
I don't see Trump. I would like to think he's got the bandwidth to pull it out. I'll help him any way that I can, but I don't know if he does. I hope that he does, but I also have some misgivings about
Can I
Trump.
comment on that real quick?
Yeah.
Trump's walking a very thin line, a very thin tightrope. And if he falls off, it will be because the winds of his Zionist affections and adorations and smugness are going to incline him in a direction of support Israel at all costs. And well, they just don't understand American muscle, so we're going to reintroduce them to American muscle. We're going to reintroduce America, because America and Israel and all this stuff, and my daughter and Jared Kushner. If Trump goes that way, if he doesn't go, I've said I'm pro-American, MAGA, only American, that means I have to disconnect from every other country, including Israel, and not be embroiled in their fuck ups and their arrogance and their wars. And Trump should know that. Netanyahu stabbed him in the back when they overthrew him. So I hope and pray Trump learns and has better people around him and doesn't go this way of Israel. Because if he does, Mike, then everything that Dustin Nemos and many, many others who look at the spiritual apocalyptic level are going to say, yep, I told you, Trump is the Antichrist. Trump is the Antichrist who is coming in, the great deceiver, the great boaster, the arrogant one, the wealthy one. He's been shown in the Simpson cartoons coming down the escalator. He's got a Masonic building in Trump Tower with groves of trees up the tower in the shape of a triangle, looking like a vagina. He's got all sorts of Masonic suggestions in his Trump Tower, and he's got Chabad Lubavitch awards and pictures in his office. Chabad Lubavitch, the Jewish extremist Goyim,
the Jewish death cult that does blood libel. They call it that tunnel in New York, taking the blood out of innocent children. But
I'll hand it to you, because that's my only concern is Trump is.
Well, no, Scott, I have the same concerns. And what tips me off here on Trump and what really caused a red flag is, Trump owns a casino in New Jersey, Atlantic City. That's a closed town. If I had $100 billion and went to Atlantic City and bought a casino or built one there, you'd find my body in a dumpster about 30 minutes later. How did Trump avoid that? Because that is that is a Jew gangster town. It just is. There's no ifs, there's no ands, there's no buts. Jew gangsters own it. And how did he get that? And whereas any other goyim wouldn't be allowed in because it's their game, and they're not cutting the pie up anymore. His affiliation with Epstein. I mean, he used to own Miss America, Miss Universe. I can see that. Hey, if I was a young guy with that kind of money, I'd buy those pageants too, and I'd be trying to sample the wares myself. Trust me, I do the same thing he did. There's no nothing wrong with a young guy going out and sowing wild oats. I don't fault him for that. But the casino in Atlantic City was the giveaway. When he filed bankruptcy, who bailed him out? The Rothschild banks. And so I have to look at these things and scratch my head and say, okay, is this guy a Trojan horse, or is he the real deal? Now, I like his rhetoric. I like everything he says. I want to close the border. I want to deport these people. I want to do all these things. But, he wasn't a very effective executive when he was in office. Now, granted, the Democrats tried to hamstring him every chance they could. He got some things done, but there's some major goals he didn't get done. And we never really needed a border wall. What we needed, more importantly, was internal enforcement, go after the employers who are hiring the illegals. And if they can't get work, they can't stay here. That's and right. So, the Simpson-Mazzoli Act of 1986 states clearly that if you hire an illegal alien, you're subject to 6 months in jail and a $3,000 fine for everyone you hire. And all you would have to do is go out and go to Hilton hotels, arrest their C-level executives, round up all their illegal employees they have, every maid, busboy, cook, whatever, and figure out how many years that the board and the C-level suite executives are going to have to do in jail, divide it accordingly, then fine them the $33,000 a piece. Done. Then do it to Tyson Foods, and then do it to the next one down the line that has high numbers of illegals. And the next thing you know, You might pay a little more at the grocery store for some chicken or for some ground beef, but you're not going to have illegals working these jobs that
Yes.
Americans won't work. And it's not that Americans won't work them; they won't work them for minimum wage,
Yeah.
which is all they want to pay. And so, I've said this before. I'll say it again. My first job, minimum wage job, I made $1.60 an hour. If I had 6 quarters of silver and a dime of silver today, it's worth about 25, 26 bucks. Okay. So if that was the minimum wage, you might find Americans who would want to do those jobs.
Yes.
But they debased our currency and they took the silver out of it so that the coinage we have is now essentially worthless. And
Yes.
so that we've been put together like this, and this was encouraged. Now, Simpson Mazzoli was the first Reagan amnesty. We've had 7 amnesties since there. Since then, it's my contention that all of those amnesties are null and void because they didn't fulfill the contract of enforcing the law against the employers. And until that's done, all the people who came here since 1986 need to go back home and need to be repatriated. Now they can go willingly and take everything they've acquired with them, or they can go be forced out and lose everything that they've acquired here. So that's just another perspective on that.
Yeah. Well, I on the coin thing and the watering down of the coin and taking out of the silver, I made the observation a couple weeks ago. I was going through the quarters. You've got tons of quarters you put in a jar, and I was separating them all to get rid of them. And I started looking at these quarters, Mike. And on one side you had the head of George Washington, but on the other side, instead of the American eagle, which I always remember the quarters having, just the American eagle, now every quarter had a different image, a different pictograph. You had a bat, as weird as that is, a bat. You had a
Well, they had
circus
the
tent.
50 states. They had all these different versions of the
There's
quarter.
like
You're exactly
20
right.
different, there's if not more, of different images on quarters. And I thought these aren't quarters. These are plastic monopoly tokens. These are worthless. These don't have the weight and the symbolic singular narrative of what it means to be an American. To be an American, George Washington, father of the country, and the golden eagle, right? Our national emblem. And now you don't have the golden eagle as the national emblem, the narrative that unites us. You've got crap and shit. You've got Maya Angelou. You've got all this other garbage putting itself on our money supply, on our quarters.
Well, all I can say about that, Scott, is that Obama was going to replace Andrew Jackson on the $20 bill and put out those Tubmans. All I can say is I'm glad we dodged that bullet. We didn't have to have $20 Tubmans
Well,
that we use as currency.
and in closing, and I know we've gone long, but this is a very
Well, we're not ready to close yet. I got one more thing to say after this,
okay.
But so go ahead and finish.
Well, I wanted to get your on the closing race, last lap before the checkered flag, and of course this could be a 10-mile race, 10-mile lap. The civil war that is brewing, the 25 countries, republic states that are backing Abbott. 3 years too late, of course, but Abbott's allegedly doing the right thing, so I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Fine, here's a good letter. It says, you don't have authority. You're committing violations of the Constitution. He should have called him a traitor and guilty of treason. But all of this is manifesting on Texas and the southern border and all of the states. And the question is this going to expand and ripen and, separate? And are you going to have a more robust, aggressive assertion of state independence from federalism? Are you going to see a kinetic clash? Are you going to see a civil war because the Bidens are going to try and clamp down, shut down, set off false flags? What is going to happen on all that? But I'll hand it to you to bring it up. Go ahead.
Well, what I think is going to happen is Biden's handlers are going to tell him that you have to respond with force because you need to be the next Abraham Lincoln. You'll be the greatest president since him, and you need to do this, Joe. So pull the trigger and drop the hammer on Abbott and those 25 other states that want to join him. That's what I predict will happen. That they will get the civil war they've been aiming for. But if we do have a civil war and it's us against them, one thing we talked about last week a little bit, we addressed was, what do you need in your bug out bag?
Yeah.
Well, let me take a little more granularity to that, and that is, what do you need in your small neighborhood unit to defend your subdivision or your block, your house, or whatever, your town.
You need a paper map. You need a paper
Well,
map and a plastic bag or laminated.
well, one of the things I want to point out is that when you go out with other guys, make sure you're standardized on what your magazines are and what your caliber of ammunition is. Because if I'm carrying a 45 and you're carrying a 9mm and you run out of pistol ammunition, I can't give you one of mine.
Right.
If you've got a 308 or a 7.62 NATO and I've got a AR-15 and 5.56, and I run out, you can't give me an ammunition. So when you have a small unit, let's say you're going out 6 guys on a patrol, make sure you all have the same weaponry as much as possible, and that you have the same magazines and the same ammunition in there, because we were talking about the 4-man firing squad. Let's say the guy on point is not where the target is. It's the guy at the 3 o'clock position where the target.
Yeah.
He may go through 300 rounds really quickly and be out or nearly out, where the guy at the 9 o'clock hasn't used any yet. And if their ammunition is not compatible, you've just lost your 3 o'clock guy, and your 9 o'clock guy cannot resupply him with what he has on his person.
Right.
And so you'll be ready for that and be prepared to stay. If you're carrying 9mm pistols, make sure they all have the same magazines. If you're carrying AR-15s with 223, 5.56, make sure you all have the same magazines, that they're all compatible, interchangeable. That is that's the best advice I can give you as far as small unit tactics. That is, it's all ad hoc. I mean, it just comes together. I mean, you don't plan this stuff with your neighbors. I'm not planning it with mine, but we don't have that need yet. If that need arises, like I said, you don't want to be the guy who runs out of ammunition first, because you know what you call a rifle without ammunition? It's a club.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be the guy in a gunfight with a club. So make sure that the guys on your team, have interchangeable magazines and components. And the other thing is, always, always, always buy extra magazines. Because, Scott, if you've ever been in a firefight, you drop a magazine, you don't even think about it. You just want to get the next one in. And if you only have 5 magazines or 10 magazines and you just left 4 of them on the field, you may not be able to recover them. And so you want to make sure that you have spares, because ammunition and rifles without magazines are pretty useless. So a lot of these plastic polymer ones, the old aluminum ones are harder to load, but the plastic polymer ones will break, particularly in cold weather. If you're at a sub-zero temperatures, you expect if you drop a plastic magazine, it may break. You may not load or function the right way. Make sure you have plenty of spares. And I'm not talking just 10. I'm talking 20, 30 spares. Ones you may never use. But these are just things that I want people to be aware of.
And have them loaded. You have to
have them loaded. Yeah, I mean, like I said, the minimum carry. If you're out there going outside the wire, minimum carry you should have is 10 magazines, 300 rounds plus 1 in your rifle. Okay, so that's 330 rounds that you should have at a minimum. Every man in your unit should have the same, and that's the minimum. And what stops you from carrying more is the weight, because they're heavy. And weight is not your friend. I mean, anybody who's ever had to lug something around for any distance, man, it gets really heavy really fast. I mean, it just does. And particularly if you're under stress and you have to run and you have to do other things that require physical exertion, it's a load. So you keep your load light, but you have to have at minimum 300 rounds. And once you get back to base, or whatever your home base is, whatever, you can load more then. But make sure you've got 300 rounds loaded on you, and go out. And don't be afraid to if you kill adversaries out there, don't be afraid to pick their bodies over, take their weapons, take their ammunition, take their food, their water, anything they got. Leave them stripped there naked. Doesn't matter. String them up by their feet naked around the borderline of your territory, and other bad guys will get the idea they don't want to come in there.
That's
That they're just
exactly right. That's
it's a
exactly
hostile
right.
environment for them.
You have to
So,
create scarecrows like in Planet of the Apes, and I mean, this
but
is
you want the crows that picking the flesh off their bones while they're hanging there, and they rot and they stink.
yeah,
And you want to give a message to any intruders coming, any
that's right.
invaders coming in, that this
That's
is
right.
not a good territory.
Yep.
And so that's how you send that message out there. But like I said, interchangeable, standardized weapons, standardized ammunition. Live by it, or die if you don't. So
Uh,
anyway,
Powerful stuff. I'll get your closing comments on how you see 2024 evolving, devolving, continuing.
well, Scott, I've always been the eternal optimist, and I've always thought that we have no problems we cannot solve. I still believe that we have no problems we cannot solve, but we've got some obstacles ahead of us that are going to be very, very hard to overcome. The fact that we don't have, they're talking about the new 10 million that just came in. What about all the illegal aliens that came in since 1986? You add that all together, we've got over 60 million people in this country that weren't born here, that came in illegally, that are taking up space. They're clogging our highways. They're in our restaurants. They're in our schools. We don't want these people here. We don't need them here. We need them to go back from whence they came, because they are here to take what is ours, what your forefathers, my forefathers fought and died for. And I'm not going to let them have it. I'm going to hang on to it. I'm going to do my best to make sure that my kid and his kids, if he ever has any, go on to keep this great nation here. But we are in trouble as a country and as a people. We are in trouble, and we don't have the unity that we once had. Once we were all Americans, didn't matter what color you are. But now, are you gay? Are you a tranny? Are you black? Are you Hispanic? And there's this diversity politics, this identity politics is a formula for death. And they're always the victim. It's never the whites who are the victim. Well, tell that to Jim Bakke. And Jim Bakke was the guy who applied to medical school and got ruled out because they had to put some black in there for affirmative action, and they didn't let him into medical school. And so he was a victim. Any white guy who's been passed over for a promotion because he's not a woman, because he's not a gay, because he's not a person of color, these are all victims. And if they're not pissed, they should be. But I think there is an anger out there in the white community. The liberals suffer from it too, but they don't know how to figure it out. They haven't done the math yet to figure out that they're aiding their own destruction.
Mm-hmm.
But there is an anger out there in white America right now with what has been done to us, how we are dispossessed, how we were disempowered.
Injustice.
From the injustice. Now, I want to, my closing comment is this, is you have to ask yourself, who do you serve? Do you serve the law or do you serve justice? And so the laws are sometimes very unjust, but justice is always true. And I think all of us, to a person, man, woman, child, we need to seek justice, not seek what's legal.
Yes.
And so that's a little different tact for me, because I've always lived my life as a Boy Scout. I color within the lines. I drive the speed limit. I don't do drugs. I don't do any kind of that stuff. Like I said, I've lived like a Boy Scout. But we're entering a time where the best of us have to become more horrible monsters than the worst of them in order to win this. We have to be willing to take off our nice face. We need to leave the trappings of civilization behind and become more savage, but more deliberate than our adversaries are. And we have to become more savage and more deliberate in order to win this, to protect our land, our families, our country, our future. And that's really what my message for today is we've got to become worse than they are. We've got to become their worst fucking nightmare.
Yeah.
The thing that they didn't want to wake up. That's what we have to become. We have to show them who wears the pants. And that's kind of as
That's right. That's right. Seek justice, and become the terror of the enemy. Mike Harris, thank you so much for joining us in Global Great Awakenings. Always
Thank you,
refreshing.
sir.
Love to have you on. Look forward to having you on again. Thank you for joining us. God bless you. Good night.
What do you think?